Okay, everyone. This is Lecture 2 from Chapter 5. We're going to be talking about hypnosis, meditation, and psychoactive drugs as the latter portion of the Chapter 5 content. Okay. So first of all, let's talk about hypnosis. Hypnosis is a systematic procedure that increases one's state of suggestibility. In layman's terms, it is focusing really, really hard, giving up a little bit of your free will, and relaxing really hard, all at the same time. It's an interesting process. It's used for many, many good things. I use it periodically in my office. It can be used for sleep disturbance. You can make a significant effect on an individual's negative sleep patterns. It can be used to help people with certain addictive issues. It is used with multiple personalities, joining them together over the course of time. It is used to assist people to address trauma. It has many, many uses. But it can only be used for what it can be used. People try to assume that way too many things can be done through hypnosis. They cannot. You can't stop yourself from being an angry person with the use of hypnosis. You can't stop smoking all of a sudden with one session of hypnosis. You can't do a whole bunch of things with hypnosis, but you can do many things with hypnosis. I used hypnosis to assist my wife to give birth to our first child. He came 7 weeks early. She was scared. We hadn't finished the birthing classes. She looked at me and said, "Hypnotize me," which I was very surprised when I was in my doctoral program taking an entire semester-long class on hypnosis. I asked her to let me hypnotize her because I had to find 25 people to let me hypnotize them, and that was part of the assignment for the class. And she wouldn't let me, and I asked why, and she said, "Because I'm not going to give that kind of control up to you." So I was surprised when she said it, but I did hypnotize her, and she went through the entire 10 hours of birth under hypnosis and never spoke louder than a whisper. She says she remembers the birth, which of course you can, but she has a lesser memory of the pain of that birth as compared to subsequent births of children. Then she told me that I should be doing hypnobirthing. And I told her she was nuts because there's only one person I wanted to be around going through transition in the birth process. I didn't want to be around a whole bunch of women going through transition. So it's a very good thing. Hypnosis has been studied for a long time. The first time anybody really talked about hypnosis was Franz Anton Mesmer. He was an 18th century Austrian. That means in the 1700s. And he would bilk people out of their money. Would go to a town in Europe, would tell them that he could cure all sorts of ills using something called post-hypnotic suggestion, which is a very real thing. Um, People can be given suggestions under hypnosis, and they will continue to do that thing or experience that thing that they're told to do for anywhere from 2 to 4 days after the hypnosis session. And so people would come with all sorts of ills. He would have them sit around a big vat of water that had metal poles sticking up out of them, and they'd hold on to the metal poles, and he'd tell them that a magnetic energy would be entering their body through the metal, and of course it was all false. But he, in essence, hypnotized them. Now, the word hypnosis didn't even exist then. The word hypnosis didn't come to be until the mid 1800s through the Scottish physician named James Braid, who gave hypnosis the name hypnosis. But Mesmer, and of course that's where the word mesmerize comes from, Mesmer would give these people post-hypnotic suggestions. If they had gout or if they had cancer, he'd tell them that they no longer were in pain or discomfort and that they were cured. And people would believe it for 2 to 4 days, and they'd start feeling it again. Then they'd have to come back for another treatment. And he was finally found out and discredited. But what he did do was provide the idea that something of what hypnosis is could potentially be used for good purposes, and it is used for good purposes. I don't like that it's used at the Clark County Fair or at high school graduation parties or whatever the case may be. It's not appropriate to use a treatment methodology for fun. That'd be like smashing up some oxy and snorting it for fun. It's a treatment modality. You don't use it that way. But it's been researched probably as deeply as any topic in psychology, simply because two individuals, mental health professionals, took two very different sides to the opinion of what hypnosis is. This was, and this is in your notes or in your study guide, there are two very, very different theories of hypnosis. The original theory, the first theory of hypnosis, was proposed by Ernest Hilgard. Hilgard believed that hypnosis is an altered state of consciousness. He had a protractor who did lots of research too, named Theodore Barber. And he and Barber did lots of research in conflict with each other's theories. And they came to understand that they both had to do incredibly good research, because they knew that the moment they put out a piece of research, the other one was going to critique it. And so they did very, very good scientific research along the hypnotic process. And because of that, we have a great deal of data associated with hypnosis. And it's good data. They were both very good researchers. They weren't enemies or anything. They just disagreed with each other on what hypnosis actually was. When we talk about Hilgard, his theory is that hypnosis actually is an altered state of consciousness and has all three characteristics. Well, we also know that we measure hypnosis by determining if a person's brainwave patterns fit that of an altered state of consciousness, and this is where some of the controversy comes in. Hilgard was a psychoanalytic theorist, and so believed that Hypnosis was an altered state of consciousness that did access the subconscious mind, whereas Theodore Barber was a cognitive theorist and believed that people simply were playing a role, and because they were playing that role, they believed they were hypnotized and in an altered state of consciousness, and so they behaved accordingly through the concept of suggestibility. The argument raged and raged. Your book still presents this concept as though the argument is still raging. It is not. Hilgard, with his dissociationist theory, where an individual disassociates from reality. Barber, with his role-playing theory that says people really aren't in an altered state. Well, about 20 years ago, some very interesting research was done. Actually, it started before that, and I came across it when I was a senior in college, which is back in the the dark ages for you guys. But I did my senior project on this topic, on this argument, and I found two very obscure pieces of research that was done in the then Soviet Union. And what it found, what both of these pieces of research found, is that people under hypnosis were found to have consistent and persistent minor brainwave pattern differences between that of an individual under hypnosis as compared to an individual in a relaxed state. And they found this consistently. Well, when I wrote my paper, I had it graded by one of the psychology professors at my university, and boy, he did not agree with my theory. He believed he agreed with Barber. I was leaning towards Hilgard's theory of dissociationism, and I got an A on the paper. But you've never seen a paper that was given an A grade that had more red marks on it in your life, because he kept crossing out those two pieces of research, saying that they weren't credible pieces of research, and et cetera, et cetera. But I'd found them and I used them. And guess who was right many years later? Me. So, what we've found over the last 20 to 25 years of hard research following these two pieces of research that came out of the Soviet Union is that, in fact, there are consistent and persistent brainwave pattern differences comparatively between individuals under hypnosis versus individuals who are just deeply relaxing. So we know that's the case. Your book doesn't seem to have found that yet. I just think it's because your author of your book likes Barber's cognitive theory. But truly, we do believe that at this point in time. Hypnosis can do great things. It can provide anesthesia. That's what it did for my wife. It provided her anesthesia while she was in labor. It can create sensory distortions, even hallucinations. I can have someone sitting on the end of the couch in my office, and I can tell them while under hypnosis that their deceased parent is sitting on the other end of the couch and is ready to have a conversation with them. Well, their deceased parent is not there. They are highly suggestible, and therefore they see their parent and they have a conversation with their parent. And this, of course, is all in that person's mind. But you can create that kind of perceptual distortion. Disinhibition is important. Just like alcohol, there's a portion in our brain, a place in our brain called the pineal gland. It's not a gland, it's just a section of your midbrain. The pineal gland seems to be where all of our boundaries are, our everyday boundaries. We won't do certain things because we just don't believe them to be appropriate, good things to do. So, interestingly, that's one place that alcohol disarms. So if you're disarming your inhibitions, then it is a disinhibitory process. Well, hypnosis disarms your inhibitions, and you will do things behaviorally that you wouldn't otherwise do while under hypnosis. That's why stage hypnotism is such a dangerous thing. And anyway, when stage hypnotists look for people in the crowd who are raising their hands to volunteer to come up on stage, they're looking for people generally who have dissociative disorders. And to look for people with dissociative disorders, whether minor or not, and then take advantage of that for entertainment is a very inappropriate thing. So that's another one of the reasons why I don't agree with it. Let's see, how far along are we? Okay. And then finally, the fourth major thing that hypnosis does, we can use it for, is post-hypnotic suggestion and amnesia. We can tell people to forget things, and they will. Once had a woman who I was working with multiple personalities, and we used hypnosis, but she had twisted her knee very badly and came into the office, and I put her under hypnosis, and she was kind of squirming around because you could see it just hurt. Well, I gave her the suggestion that her knee didn't hurt anymore, and lo and behold, it quit hurting because her brain decided to go along with it. We went through the session, came out of the session, and then I told her when we came out of the session that I had told her her knee would no longer hurt, and she said, "Yeah, I noticed that. My knee's not hurting." And she went to pick it up and bend it, and I said, No. Don't touch your knee. Don't do anything with your knee that you wouldn't have done anyway. Just be careful. And so she was. And she called me about 3 days later and said, "Hey, my knee started to hurt again, but it doesn't hurt near as bad as it did because I had 3 days to let it heal while it didn't hurt." And so it really does do that. People can go without pain. People have undergone intense, very significant surgeries just under hypnosis as an anesthetic. So post-hypnotic suggestion and amnesia. Okay, there's hypnosis for you. Meditation. What's meditation? Meditation is extreme focus on one thing to the exclusion of everything else in one's environment. That one thing for the most classical of meditative types is called a mantra. A mantra generally is a saying or a chant that an individual does. It's significant to them. It has meaning to them. And they chant that phrase over and over and over and over and over until they are focusing on nothing but that phrase or the mantra. And then they stop the mantra. Their belief is that they are now at a higher state of consciousness, and greater truth will be available to them at that higher state of consciousness. Well, that's the use of classical meditation, transcendental meditation. But meditation can be used for many things. It certainly is part of Eastern religions, but it can also be used to help people control their anxiety. I worked with someone who would meditate for 20 minutes before lunch every day because he had a severe ulcer condition, stomach ulcer condition, and it diminished the level of stomach acids that he would produce before he would eat. It can do a lot of good things. And by the way, every good thing can be a bad thing if you use it wrong. Okay, quick story. Went to Fred Meyer one day trying to get something that I needed to fix something. And I walked in and noticed that there were a bunch of flyers under people's windshield wipers. Came back out, there was a flyer under my windshield wiper. I pulled it off, looked at it, and it was advertising a pseudo-Eastern religion. And I say pseudo-Eastern religion because it was not a real Eastern religion. It was an Americanized religion that used some Eastern religious principles, but really is not a very healthy way to live. And a young man came running up to me, and he had a handful of papers. And of course, he was the guy that was passing out the flyers, and he wanted to talk to me. And boy, did he want to talk. And it was very clear nobody else had talked to him all day long. So I felt bad for him, and I talked to him for a little bit, and then I told him, it's time for me to go. And no. And he wanted to talk to me some more. Well, the poor sucker didn't know that I'd read a whole lot more than he had about the concepts he was trying to talk to me about, but I had no desire to make him feel bad or anything of the sort. But I did want to go, and so I told him, look, I really need to leave. And under his protests, I got in the car, started it, put my arm up on the seat next to me, and turned around to back up, and there he was, standing behind my car, holding his papers like this, and wouldn't move. And I motioned him out of the way, and he wouldn't move. I have to admit, I had a thought. And everybody knows what that thought is, right? Vroom, thump, thump. But you can't do that. Everybody has those thoughts. You just can't do them. So I said, fine. Turned the car off, opened the door, swung my feet out, sitting on the car seat. He came up, kind of crouched down, and I just started to fire questions at him about the things that he thought he knew, and he didn't know. He was a neophyte in this whole process. He didn't know what was going on. And he started to get a little anxious. And that made me happy, because if he was anxious, he was going to go away. But all of a sudden, I saw that anxiety started to cause a reaction. And it's a reaction that I've seen many a time in the office when people start to enter an altered state of consciousness. And I saw that happening. I said, no, wait, it's fine, I'll quit asking questions. But it was too late, because he started rocking and he started chanting. And I've never seen somebody's eyes glaze over faster than that, and he was gone. And there was no bringing him out. And I know how to bring people out of altered states of consciousness, but he was not coming out because I was there, and I was the one, according to him, that caused his altered state of consciousness. Clearly, this was a man with a dissociative disorder. He had joined this group, and this group had given him some meditative process that he actually used to diminish the anxiety in his life. But we can't avoid anxiety all the time. That's not a healthy thing. So, there I was, stuck. I can't just leave, because somebody's going to pull in, not see him, and hit him. So, what am I going to do? And then I heard the sweet sound of the shopping carts being pushed through the parking lot. The kid gathering the carts. Brrr, you know that sound? Well, I got up, stuck my head around, and saw him, and I said, hey. He said, can you go get your manager, please? And he was trying to be helpful, and he came jogging over, said, sir, is there anything I can... I'll go get the manager. And he ran off and got the manager. Manager came out, told me how this guy wasn't supposed to be passing those flyers. I didn't give a crud whether or not he was passing the flyers out. I just wanted to go home. And I told him the whole story, and he said, oh, well, that's okay. You go. I'll stay here with them. So I left. Came back, though, the next Saturday, looking for that same manager, because I wanted to know what happened. And found him, and he said, oh, yeah, it was about 5-10 minutes of rocking and chanting, and then he stopped rocking and chanting, and then he kind of came to, and I told him he couldn't be in that parking lot doing that stuff. So, any good thing can be used in a negative fashion. If it's used too much, the wrong way, whatever the case may be. So, yeah. Like I said, meditation can be used for a lot of good things. Extreme focus on one thing to the exclusion of everything else, and then using that space to provide some of the help that a person needs. Okay, let's talk about drugs. We've got a lot to talk about with drugs, but the drugs we're talking about are psychoactive drugs. A psychoactive drug is a drug that affects a person's thinking, a person's emotions, and or a person's behavior. Any one or all three. Now, there are a lot of medications out there, drugs out there, that don't have those psychoactive effects. You can take ibuprofen, and it can make your pain go away, and that may make your behavior a little better, or make you feel a little better, but it's not having a direct effect on either your emotions, your behavior or your thought processes. Drugs that have an effect on any or all of those three aspects of us, those are psychoactive drugs. Now, there's a couple terms we need to define. First of all, drug abuse versus drug dependence. Drug abuse means an individual is utilizing drugs in a way that affects some aspect of their everyday functioning negatively. So it could be as simple as somebody drinking too much alcohol every day, which is abusing alcohol. It could be as simple as someone binging for a weekend every 3 or 4 months and not being able to go to work for a few days after that. Both of those are drug abuse, the misuse of a drug such that it affects everyday functioning. Drug dependence means that we need the drug to function. Now that means we're already addicted to the drug. And if we don't have the drug, we go into withdrawal. And therefore we become non-functional. Therefore we need the drug to resist the withdrawal. Now, that means the individual's functioning. That doesn't mean the individual is at their maximal level of functioning. Of course not. But they are able to function. That's what we call functional alcoholics, an individual who can continue to function even though they're not at their best functioning, but they're not in withdrawal. We'll talk about withdrawal at the end of this. There's drug tolerance. Drug tolerance means that you have to, over time, have more of that drug in order to sustain the same effect of the drug. So the body gets used to it, the brain gets used to it. And you need more and more and more of it. That's what opiates do. That's what benzodiazepines do. They require more and more of the drug in order to have the same effect. And then there's a difference between physiological dependence and psychological dependence. Physiological dependence means that the person's body needs the drug. So this is like alcohol. If they quit taking alcohol, they start going into withdrawal symptoms. Whereas psychological dependence, the person only believes that they need it. And if you were to give them a placebo, the person would be just fine. They wouldn't even react at all. They'd just take the sugar pill and believe they were getting their medication. This is what I think of when people are prescribed 1 or 2 milligrams of Zoloft, an antidepressant. It doesn't do anything for you. You have to have at least 10, if not 20 or 30 milligrams of Zoloft in you to affect depression. But boy, people think their 1 milligram of depression is making all the difference in the world. I imagine there's 1 in a million who it could have that effect on, but very, very unlikely. So that's the difference between physiological, where the physical body needs the drug, and if not, goes into withdrawal, versus psychological dependence, where a person thinks they need it. Okay? Now, the book divides your drugs up into a whole bunch of different categories, but I'm going to just divide psychoactive drugs up into 3 categories. And those are depressants, stimulants, and hallucinogens. Depressants, stimulants, hallucinogens. Depressants diminish physiological functioning. Stimulants increase physiological functioning. Hallucinogens distort perception. So let's start with depressants. What is the most common central nervous system depressant used in the world? Yes, the demon alcohol. Okay, it's used more than any other. But what are some of the other depressants? Well, narcotics, benzodiazepines, quaaludes, barbiturates, etc. These are all depressants. Narcotics. Everybody thinks narcotics is just all illegal drugs. That's not the case. Narcotics are all drugs that have an opioid foundation. Now that means both natural opiates and synthetic opiates. What are the natural opiates? The natural opiates come from opium. Opium, heroin. Did you know that heroin used to be a medicine and is still used at times as a medicine for severe pain issues in hospitals? Morphine, codeine, these are all natural opiates. There are also lots of synthetic opiates made in the laboratory, like all the oxys and the percas. Oxy this and perca that. Those are all synthetic opiates. Benzodiazepines. These are all the drugs that end in PAM, lorazepam, alprazolam, clonazepam, etc. This is Xanax, Valium, Ativan. These are all minor tranquilizers, and they do a good job as minor tranquilizers. They can be very much used for severe anxiety issues where people need rescue medications, and these can be used. They're also very addictive. What else that I haven't said already? Well, that's probably good enough. These are all depressants. Stimulants. Well, what's the most commonly used stimulant in the world? You are right. It is caffeine. Caffeine is a stimulant. There's nicotine. Did you know nicotine was a stimulant? Nicotine, well, it's a little confusing actually. Because if somebody is hooked on nicotine, they're a smoker, and they're feeling kind of that agitation that comes from not taking the nicotine, and they pull out a cigarette and they take one big long drag and blow it out nice and easy, and it calms them down. So how can it be a stimulant if it calms you down? Well, nicotine has an extremely short half-life. That means the effects of it go away quickly, and therefore you need to have it again quickly. And by the way, nicotine is the most rapidly addicting chemical. Most rapidly addicting chemical there is. That doesn't mean it's the most dangerous addictive chemical. It's just the most rapidly addicting. But the reason that it calms the person down is because it's satisfying the withdrawal symptoms. That agitation, that nicky fit, that is nicotine withdrawal. And that first drag satisfies the nicotine withdrawal, gets it into the blood system, and the person's okay. Then, if they take another couple drags after about a minute, if they hold their hand out, you'll see the hand will be shaking just slightly because it's a stimulant and it makes you shake like that. Amphetamines. Are there any good uses for stimulants? Well, yeah, amphetamines, there's really good uses for attention deficit disorder, for appetite management. These are all good methods of using amphetamines. Amphetamines are also highly addictive, extremely addictive. And of course, you take the methyl molecule and add it on to the amphetamine, and you have methamphetamine, which is just amphetamines on roids, figuratively. Cocaine is a stimulant. There's lots of other stimulants too, but that's a good recitation of the most common stimulants. Cocaine is still used as a painkiller in some medications. So it does have some viable uses, but doesn't have viable uses also. The third category of medications that we're talking about here, or drugs that we're talking about here, are hallucinogens. Hallucinogens distort. Goodness. Excuse me. Stupid sounds. Hallucinogens distort your perceptions. There are a lot of hallucinogens out there too. Some that you wouldn't realize are hallucinogens. First of all, there are natural and synthetic hallucinogens. So the natural ones. Psilocybin. Psilocybin is the active agent in shrooms, mushrooms. Peyote, mescaline. They come from certain types of cacti in the Southwest. Do you think it's okay for Native American medicine men to distribute mescaline and peyote as part of religious worship among Native American tribes in the Southwest? Well, doesn't matter if you like it or not. It's legal, and they can do it on the reservation. There are other synthetics. There's salvia, and it's going to be outlawed soon. Do you know the most potent natural hallucinogen is the mucus excretion from the back of a rainforest tree frog? Now I want to know the first person who figured that out, right? Pick up the tree frog. I think I'm going to lick this frog. Yeah. Well, it's incredibly potent and extremely hallucinatory. There are also numerous synthetic hallucinogens. LSD, PCP. Timothy Leary spent his whole life trying to find a medical use for LSD. Never did. And I promise you, somebody in this class is going to write a paper on the benefits of hallucinogens, and they're going to find a couple of articles from two specific researchers that suggest that they are on the verge of finding a medical use for LSD. Well, they've been on the verge of finding a medical use for LSD for the last 50 years, more like 60. And they haven't found it yet, and they ain't going to find it because there isn't one. PCP, a little bit more potent. There's lots of designer drugs out there that cause hallucinations. Rave drugs, ecstasy. Did you know that part of the chemical makeup of ecstasy is actually rat poison? It's the rat poison that turns off the hypothalamus in ecstasy that causes people to drink, but the hypothalamus is turned off, and therefore it's not mediating your body temperature, and the person gets hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter until their fever, if you will, is so hot that it kills them. Pretty nasty way to go. Now, I have left out one drug. Marijuana. Where does it fit? Well, some people would think it fits in depressants. It does have some depressant qualities, but it actually fits under hallucinogens. THC, the most common, or the most frequently identified chemical in marijuana, cannabis, is an hallucinogen. How do we know that? Because marijuana distilled and put into brick-shaped form is called hashish. That's all hashish is. And hashish is a powerful hallucinogen. Now, I know none of you do this, but You know, when somebody's been smoking a lot of weed and they keep scraping their bowl and saving that resin for when they're out of weed, and they take that resin out and smoke it, it's got a whole bunch of THC in there and it gives you a much stronger high, sometimes to hallucinatory qualities. Now, it sounds like I'm speaking negatively about marijuana, but I'm not. Um, THC has very few medicinal uses. It has one or two, but not much. But there are two other major chemical compounds. There are others, of course, but the three major chemical compounds in marijuana are THC, CBD, and CBN. THC makes you high. And I'm sorry, there is no medicinal value in getting high. CBN makes you feel like a couch potato. It drains you of motivation. But the CBD is great stuff. It's one of the best medicinal finds that we've made in the last 20 years. And Europe has done a great deal more research than the United States. We are right on the verge of a company releasing a CBD medication through the FDA onto the market. And there's going to be many following that. But you have to do many clinical trials, etc., to lead up to it. But CBD can do a lot of things. Little children with severe seizure disorders on CBD don't have seizures. It can be a remarkable painkiller. But I don't agree with smoking the stuff. People tell me, but that gets it into the system quicker. Fabulous. But come on. It's still putting a burning carcinogen into your lungs. And then people will always tell me, well, it's a whole lot better than smoking cigarettes. Well, great. Smoking cigarettes is bad. Smoking weed's not as bad. But it's bad. It's stupid to smoke it. Take it through tinctures. Take it through edibles. Take it through pills. But CBD is a great medication. But smoking it is stupid. So now I'll get off my soapbox there. Okay. Those are your three categories of psychoactive drugs. Some are just drugs that you people use for fun. Some of it is drugs that people use for medication. There are lots of reasons for it. Now, finally, withdrawal. Withdrawal is horrible. What's the worst withdrawal of any drug? Heroin. Sweats, cramps, vomiting, fever, hallucinations. It's horrific to watch somebody cold turkey off of heroin. It's just horrific. And it's not so great to watch them come off of other natural opiates, codeine or morphine. It's bad withdrawal. But the second worst withdrawal is alcohol. Alcohol is horrible. The symptoms aren't as bad. Have you ever heard of the DTs, delirium tremens? That means that a person starts to shake badly when they're withdrawing, and they start to go into delirium, meaning they see things, hallucinations that aren't really there. Now, this is someone who's been drinking a lot for a long time will have this kind of withdrawal. They cramp, they feel really bad, but the interesting thing about alcohol withdrawal is that the worst potential outcome of alcohol withdrawal is death. It can kill you. That's why often benzodiazepines, remember I talked about the minor tranquilizers? Which reminds me, there are also major tranquilizers. These are antipsychotic medications. Major tranquilizers are the phenothiazines, the thorazine, stelazine, Haldol, Prolixin, Geodon, and numerous others, Respirodol. These are all antipsychotics that come from that original phenothiazine chemical. Those are major tranquilizers. But people often go on to the benzodiazepines, the Valium, the Xanax, the Ativan. while they're coming off of alcohol, because it mediates much of the withdrawal symptoms and makes it a little easier withdrawal. But that's what withdrawal is all about. People avoid withdrawal like a plague, and that's why they often get pretty badly addicted. Okay, there's your second lecture for Chapter 5. Good luck, and should be late tomorrow or sometime Friday that I'll have the first lecture up for Chapter 6. Good luck all. Get your stuff done. I'm going to give you a different due date for the paper. I'm going to stretch that out a little bit for the project, and I'll be letting you know that in the next little while. So, good to see y'all. Have a good week. We'll talk to you soon.